Federation of Fear, Chapter 1. Vizon opened his eyes, astonished to still be alive. The last thing he remembered, he was surrounded by Zyglak, who seemed immune to his wit and charm. There was a flash, the sensation of being grabbed by someone stronger than he, a weird sensation of travel and darkness. He looked around. The room he was occupied was a large cell, and he wasn't in it alone. Vizon didn't recognize any of the other 4 occupants. All stood well away from the others. By reflex, he started calculating how long it would take to disable them and how quickly he could pick the lock of the cell door. Vizon's musings were interrupted by the appearance of a 6th figure outside the cell. He was tall, lean, strong, and wore a domed helmet. He carried a wicked double-bladed sword. The newcomer looked over the 5 prisoners as if they were cargo-hauling mussel crabs up for auction. "My name is Brutaka," the visitor said. "I know you have questions, and I'm not here to answer them. Where are you? Who I work for? Or what this place is? You don't need to know. What you do need to know is there are 2, and only 2 ways you can get out of here." A Zean female stopped up by the bars and said dangerously in a soft voice, "And they are?" "You can walk out, Brutaka, under your own power, and carry a mission for some friends of mine," Brutaka replied. "Or I can carry you out, plant you in a hole outside, and we'll see if anything grows." Brutaka turned his attention to the others. "All of you have something in common. You have all had dealings with the Brotherhood of Makuta. Brutaka here betrayed them to the Dark Hunters and betrayed the Dark Hunters as well. Now both sides want her dead. Artidax and Karpa looked over there are Baraki, whose armies were crushed 80,000 years ago by the Brotherhood. The Makuta in the corner was Spirea, who fouled up an experiment on the island of Zakhez so badly that his own people were marked for death. Vizon timidly raised a hand. "Excuse me, O brutal blade-wielding lover of gardening. I have never met any Makuta face to face, and wouldn't know one if one stepped on me and the ground hit me in the dirt. I think maybe you wanted someone else. I'm Vizon with an N. You see, not Vizok with a K, and..." The crab-like Karpa looped over and picked Vizon up by the neck and bounced him off the back wall. "You talk too much," the Baraki growled. "Oh yes," Brutaka muttered, shaking his head. "This is going to work out just fine." To be continued. Chapter 2. Brutaka was fierce as she walked along the waterfront, clad in a cloak made of plant fiber. She imagined over and over again all the disgusting things she would someday turn Brutaka into with her Rotuka spinner. One way or another, he was going to pay for this. Brutaka and his team, Brutaka, Vizon, Karpa, Artidax, and Makuta Spirea, had arrived on the shores of the island of Stealth in a small boat. As Brutaka recognized the skyline, she began to protest. Stealth was the home of the late Sidorak, her former comrade and his people. Worse, Brutaka had set Sidorak up to be killed, and it was likely everyone in Stealth knew that. She would be about as welcome there as a Kikanalo stampede. But Brutaka had insisted that they would need a bigger boat for where they were going, and the easiest way to get one, and this was the easiest way to get one. The only other team member to voice in the objection was Spirea, who believed that the Brotherhood of Makuta agents were waiting in every village to grab him. "And just how do we purchase this boat?" Brutaka hissed. "We have no equipment, no arms, and no other than yours, and not even those ridiculous Matoran widgets. We have nothing of value to offer in exchange." "Of course we do," Brutaka answered. He pushed the doors open of the trading house. "We have you." No sooner were the words out of his mouth than Karpa had seized from behind. The team along with the struggling Brutaka stepped outside the dimly lit and foul-smelling shack. The proprietor was one of Sidorak's species. "We're here to make a purchase," said Brutaka. "Your fastest ship, outfitted with supplies for a long voyage to the south." "To the south?" snorted the trader. "Meaning I will never see my ship or you again unless you can make me rich." Brutaka took the hood off Brutaka, who glared at him with a number of her eyes, who glared at him with murder in her eyes. Who would the reward of you'll get for capturing the killer of Siderock be payment enough? The trader smiled and invited the party out to view his prized craft. So excited was he by the visions of the wealth he would soon be that he never noticed Artidax was slipping away. The boat turned out to be a good seized, well-armed disc launcher and large enough to accommodate at least a dozen beings. The crew of a large blue and gray armored bruisers were at work on it now. "We'll take it," said Brutaka. There was a loud splash from the ocean on the side of the ship, but no one paid much mind to it. And I'll take the murder," the trader said. "Siderock was no prize, but we can't let a vortex in our Rahi kill our kind and get away with it, now can we?" There was another splash, then another and another. Brutaka ignored them. "Of course not. If you want these people to believe you caught this dangerous criminal, you'll need to look like you've just been in a fight. A light tap up to your head would do the trick. Perhaps my colleague Vizon can handle it. You wouldn't feel a thing. Ever again," Vizon chatted, smiling. "Splash, splash, splash." The trader looked over to Vizon. He was nowhere as near as physically imposing as the rest of them. How much damage could he do? "All right," said the trader. One blow, a light one, just to look convincing." Vizon's grin grew wider. Brutaka struggled against Carper's grip, and Brutaka walked casually through the scene. Surveying the boat, Vizon drew his fist back, and then, in a smooth motion, Brutaka wheeled and whacked the trader behind the head. The trader crumpled to the ground unconscious. "Hey," said Vizon, "he was mine. I would have hurt him much. I only would have needed the 3 or 4 hours and the right tools just to make sure there would be no trouble." "That's the point," Brutaka replied. "You enjoy your work a little too much. Now everyone on board. That includes you, Brutaka." They climbed onto the ship to find Artidax standing alone. The Baraki took a little bow, pointed to the hypnotic eyes, and said, "The crew decided to go for a swim, all at once. Imagine that." "Why all the trouble?" muttered Carver. We could have just stormed in and stolen the ship." "And had all of Stealth after us?" asked Brutaka. "Not to mention every Dark Hunter and Brotherhood member around as soon as they heard Brutaka was here?" "And what about the traitor, fool?" asked Brutaka. "He saw me." Brutaka laughed as the ship moved slowly away from the shore. "Who's going to believe anyone stupid enough to stand still and get hit?" To be continued. Chapter 3. Brutaka and his bizarre crew have been at sea for 3 days when he called them all together. "It's time to let you know our mission, and before you ask, you are all chosen for this trip for one good reason. You're expendable. No one's going to care if any of you live or die, which makes you ideal for this job." Carver grumbled, something unspokenly foul. Brutaka chose to ignore it. "We are going to an island south of anything on Shard," Brutaka continued, "but it's not uninhabited. In fact, it has one very special resident, a Makuta named Miserix." Now it was Spirea's turn to mutter something, though his words were more in shock than in anger. "Miserix is one of those who you do not know. He was the leader of the Brotherhood of Makuta before the current holder of that title," said Brutaka. "He was overthrown and wound up imprisoned in a volcanic island. He's guarded by Rahi and the Great Beings. And the Great Beings know what else. Things someone figured out would be able to kill an escaping Makuta, and our job is to break him out." At first none of the team members said anything. Then Artidax spoke up. "What do we get out of this? Money, power, or freedom?" Brutaka smiled. "You'll get to live another day." "And what do we do with him after we have him?" asked Brutaka. "Hold him for ransom?" "That's not your concern," Brutaka replied. "All you have to do is a role and play in this mission. When we get close to the island, you'll be given weapons and equipment. Try and run at any time, and the friends of mine will hunt you down. Friends who make me look like a big, cuddly mussel crab. It was Vizon who spotted them first, a small fleet of ragtag vessels approaching them from the west. They were about the ugliest boats anyone could have ever imagined, slapped together from remnants of wreckage and barely seaworthy. But he wasn't focused on the look of the ships, rather the identity of the crews. Zyglak, he shouted. The other beings rushed to the rail to look. Sure enough, the reptilian beings known as the Great Beings' mistakes were manning the ships. Notoriously violent and destructive, Zyglak hated the Great Spirit of Madanui and anything associated with him. It was doubtful that they were playing a social call. Brutaka tried to steer the ship away from them, but the wind and waves were not cooperating. After a few minutes, he realized why. Makuta Spirea was using his power over weather to keep the ship in place. Did you really think it would be that easy? Said Spirea. I deduced our goal days ago and passed the message to my Zyglak friends through the channels of stealth. Vizon looked horrified as he spent many days a captive of the Zyglak not so long ago. It was an experience he was anxious to repeat. Friends? Zyglak have no friends, just meals they haven't eaten yet. They're outcasts, said Spirea, and so am I. Now, Brutaka, I am taking command of this ship, and we'll be setting a new course to the island of Zakaz. It was there where I met at defeat and disgrace. That is, my grand experiment failed, because the inhabitants were too savage to know what to do with my gifts. It was their fault I was cast out of the Brotherhood, and now they are going to pay. To be continued. Chapter 4. It's been 3 days since Spirea's takeover in the team's vessel. Since then, they have steered a course for the island of Zakaz, surrounded by side-filled boats with murderous Zyglak. Spirea had been acting every inch of the captain of the ship, ordering the others to be particularly hard on Brutaka. Through it all, Brutaka said nothing and made no attempt to strike at Spirea. To think we were beginning to feel a little afraid of him, Takadak said, gesturing towards Brutaka. Speak for yourself, Carper replied. Home, beamed Vizon. True, I've never been to Zakaz, as I'm not even really one of the native species. In fact, they'll probably kill me on sight, or tie me upside down over a spiked dagger plant. But at least I'll die at home. Brutaka had abandoned any hope that Brutaka was going to act and concentrated instead of Spirea. The Brotherhood has overextended itself over the recent years, she assured him, warring with the Dark Hunters and the Toa. They are weak. If you struck at them now with your army, you could take over Deathreal and rule the universe. Of course, you will need someone by your side who knows all the factions on how to best use them. Spirea looked at her as if she were something struck to his boot. I would sooner offer my neck to a dual axe blade than trust you, female. Your name has become another word for treachery. Better than being another word for failure, Brutaka muttered. The conversation was ended by the appearance of a land portbow. It was the island of Zakaz in all its ruined so-called glory. A handful of Dark Hunter vessels could be seen in the waters nearby on patrol. The word from Spirea and the Zyglak vessels attacked. Taken by surprise, the 3 Dark Hunter ships were sunk immediately and all the others beached on the shores of the island, only for the crews to be slain by a mob of Skakti natives. Spirea laughed on sight. The Skakti believe they know what savagery is, he said, but they have never met a Zyglak, and the Makuta believe they know all the colors and shapes of revenge. But I will introduce them to a shade darker than they could ever imagine. The mini armada surged forward, the Zyglak already preparing to storm the beaches, and they were still 500 yards from shore when the first Zyglak suddenly lurched and began to sink. They were followed by another, and another. Soon the Zygote vessels on every side were taking on water, gaping holes torn in their holes below the waterline. Artidax rushed to the whale. He got a glimpse of beings just under the water, attacking the Zygote craft. From a distance, it almost looked like his old ally, Elec. Wherever they were, it looked like it moved like a fish underwater, and the ships were no match for their claws. Shocked by the abrupt annihilation of his force, Spirea was unprepared for Brutaka's attack. An energy blast knocked him down to his feet. A well-placed kick kept him on the ground, and Brutaka's blade was pressed against his chest armor. "Go ahead," Brutaka said coldly. "Use your powers. Think you can do it before I rip open your armor? And how long do you think your energy would last out here with no body to occupy? Or maybe we can just throw you overboard right now." "How?" Spirea began. "How did I deal with the Zygote?" How did I deal with the Zygote?" said Brutaka. "Simple. You have friends. So do I. Mine are species of water dwellers who are specifically modified to be my employers to kill Makuta, and they live off the coast of Zakaz right now and are practicing their skills on your Zygote. I don't want to look. It's messy." "Wait a minute," said Artidax. "It's not that I'm complaining, but how did you manage to get them in touch with your friends of yours when you never left the ship?" Brutaka hauled Spirea to his feet. All around, the ocean was lifted by wrecked ships and dead Zygote. Spirea had his friends following us, and I had someone following us since we left stealth just in case of emergency, and here she comes. The others turned to see a small skiff approaching from the east. A lone pilot was a female, lithy, and well armed. She came alongside and clambered aboard the ship. Brutaka noticed that her left arm was completely mechanical. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for Spirea. "This is the last member of our team," said Brutaka. "Treat her as you would me, and be sure that she will treat you even worse than I do. Her name is Lariska." To be continued. Chapter 5. Lariska stood at the bow with Brutaka, watching the ship cleave through the water behind them, and other members of the team were keeping a careful eye on Makuta Spirea. Not that they could have done much to stop him if he tried to make a break, but Brutaka had done a little math and explained to Spirea how many hours he was likely to survive once the Brotherhood of Makuta knew where he was. And then he assured Spirea that the ship and all of its occupants were all destroyed. The Brotherhood would be notified immediately where to start looking. That was a bluff, of course. Spirea had spent a lot of his life fleeing from his former comrades and running and hiding to get in the habits for a while. As Brutaka expected, Spirea bought it and backed off. The ship had veered away from Zakaz and was on its way south. There was one more stop it had to make before it headed to their ultimate target. And this was the one Brutaka had dreaded. It's time to arm the team. The island came into little view more than a piece of barren rock. It was not the original site for this meeting, but the plans have changed. 2 Order of Madanui members, Boltar and the 9-foot tall warrior named Trinuma, had been dispatched with a cache of weapons for Renzeverus on a small wooden island just off the mainland. But a Makuta named Icarax had spotted their appearance and attacked. The fight was furious but brief. Boltar was slain, crushed by the Makuta's magnetic power, and Trinuma barely escaped to tell the tale. Of the depression, he stored his weapons in the first place he came, before returning to Deaxia with the tragic news. The ship dropped an anchor right off course. Brutaka warned Artidax and Carver that he would be keeping a careful eye on them on the swim over, just in case of any funny ideas about driving and deep escaping. Vizon was the first to react when they set foot on the rocky shore. There is something wrong here, he said, with his tone unusually serious. Something beyond my powers can cope with. You don't have any powers, freak, Harper reminded him. I don't, Vizon said, confused. Where was I when I was being handled out? Let me see. Makuda's liar. Voyanui tunnels, prison, and how could I have missed the meeting? I was always there when the action was. Quiet, said Lariska, dagger drawn. There is one statement in your babble. There is something not right in this place. Brutaka approached, carrying the weapons. Artidax took a long, thin blade, whereas Carver grabbed a broadsword. Brutaka pounced on a Brutaka launcher. Brutaka handed Spirea a projectile weapon and warned him with a cold smile not to point it at himself or anyone else. Bizon got a spear which he turned over in his hands with no real enthusiasm. What's it to do? He asked. Nothing, Brutaka answered. But with your powers, you don't need it, right? Bizon brightened. Right, he agreed, having forgotten once again that he had no powers. Carper growled in frustration and stalked away. We have what we came for, Artidax said nervously. Let's go. There's something in that cave up ahead, said Lariska. I can hear what it sounds like, breathing, and it's a wet sound. As if something were inhaling through the mud. And there's something else. It almost sounds like something slithering. Spirea took a step back. I know where we are, he said, eyes darting from side to side, expecting an attack. Mutrin told me about this place, though it didn't look like this ages ago. We have to go. We have to go now. But it was already too late. Vast walls of rock suddenly sprang up from the shoreline, forming a 200-foot-high wall around the island, cutting the team off from their boat. Blast it down, Brutaka ordered. But even with the power of his blade, was not enough to penetrate the stone. Spirea had shapeshifted himself some wings, so he was trying to fly over the top. A sharp spear of stone erupted out of the top as well as of the wall and impaled one of his wings, sending him spiraling towards the ground. Lariska ran, leapt the wall feet first, and propelled herself through the midair to catch the falling Makuda. There was no time to marvel at her athletic feat or make other attempts to escape, for now a voice was coming through the cave, but not a voice like anyone's present or had ever heard before. It sounded like a slimy, repulsive sound that comes from a nest of feeder worms is disturbed. Even Brutaka had to suppress a shudder. Visitors, said the voice. At last. Who are you? Said Brutaka. Did you imprison us here? I warn you. You don't know what the power you face. A massive tentacle shot out of the cave, wrapping itself around Brutaka, pulling him inside. In the next moment, he was in the presence of something horrible, so alien that it took all his willpower to hold in his sanity. Now, said the entity with its grip. Now tell Trenkrom your power. To be continued. Chapter 6. Brutaka tried to close his eyes. It didn't help. He couldn't get the image of Trenkrom out of his mind. A withering crimson mass of tentacles emerging in a gelatinous central core. With two dead yellow eyes that somehow followed every movement without ever moving themselves. At least that was what he had seen at a glance. Somehow Brutaka knew the gaze long at Trenkrom to invite madness. The entity seemed over time had merged with the stone floor and walls of the cave, so that the lurker and place of concealment were one. The acrid stench of decay hung over everything in vain. Brutaka tried to break free of the grip of Trenkrom's tentacle. He could feel the strange being trying to probe his mind, but so far Brutaka's mental training had allowed him to resist. If that should fail, he knew that the secrets of the Order of Madanui would be exposed to this monster. What wonders have come into my universe in this millennia since my exile? Trenkrom said softly, his voice as revolting as his form. I must know. Hesitantly, the other members of Brutaka's team had entered the cave, only to wish they hadn't. It was only Lariska, both a steel dagger in hand, who kept them from fleeing. You think me alien, and other, Trencrom continued, but I am of the substance of this universe. I walked here long before you or even Matanui himself. Have you not heard the tales? Well, there is a Trencrom legend, said Brutaka, but the tales are obviously some parts are left out. Trencrom laughed. The sound made the team wish death were to come to them right now. Before the great spirit of Matanui was born, the great beings created one being who was purely organic. They taught me the ways of the universe, creating and placed me in its core. There I was to remain, maintaining heat, light, and all the forces as their creation whole. Brutaka had managed to work an arm partly loose with little luck. He would be able to get his hand out of the dagger and cut himself through. All he needed was time. What happened? How did you end up here? My time was always to be short, Trencrom replied. I was the shepherd of this universe until Matanui was prepared to take power. A torrent of light came to me and said, the hour has come for me to move on. A crafter of canisters he was, whose stand he did not survive our encounter. I surrendered myself to my fate, only to be exiled here by the great beings, and bound to this rock. His voice turned heavy with bitterness. The universe, it seems, did not need two entities supreme. What do you want with us? Whispered Vizon. And please, don't say someone to hold the mirror for you. I would know what has gone on in this universe in the last millennia, Trencrom answered. My visitors have been few in number. You seven will remain here until I gain knowledge I need from your minds. Of course, sadly, you will have no minds left when I am done. Why ask us? Said Larissa. You obviously don't really care. When you shut up his Carper. Rule number 1: don't annoy the giant tentacled monster, or don't they teach you one in the Shadowed One school? Or don't they teach you one in the Shadowed One school? Be quiet, snapped Lariska. Trencrom, your universe is in danger. It is our job to help save it. If you keep us here, you'll be hurting the one thing you helped bring into being. Carper edged slowly to the side, sword in hand. No one paid attention. All eyes were on Lariska, who had been grabbing one of Trencrom's many arms. Without the discipline Brutaka possessed, her mind was open for the entity. She screamed as a lifetime of memories were sifted through an instant. Screamed as she saw glimpses of the ancient mind of Trencrom. When he finally released her, she collapsed on the stone floor. Mutrin, Trencrom muttered to himself. So long ago I entered his mind, and he mine. And so he learned how best to strike at Matanui, and his kind dared to reach the power, and fate chose to deny them. How entering. It's more than that, Brutaka said. Tell him, Spirea. Tell him what happened to him if the Makuta succeed in their plans. If the plan succeeds, Spirea began. He glanced around as if one of his former comrades had been somewhere nearby listening. A shadow will fall. Makuta will rule the universe. There will enforce Rakshi. Anyone with the power to threaten that rule would die. That means anyone. Impossible, said Trencrom. Suddenly, the minds of every team member were filled with nightmarish images projected by the tentacled entity. Visions that would sicken even the mad. No one can approach without assent. No one can fight me. No one. I am eternal. Brutaka had his dagger in hand now. Maybe not, he said, but bettering that there was a time where you said no one can buy you, and look what happened. Trencom paused in thought. Brutaka started to make a new move. Then he caught Carper out of the corner of his eye. The Brachio was raising his sword to strike the entity. It was too late to shout, too late to stop him. Carper was brought his blade down, confident that he had taken his enemy by surprise. Then a third eye suddenly appeared on Trencom, one gazing right at Carper. The Brachio was frozen mid-blow. A shaft of energy shot out from the eye, bathing him in its glow. The next instant, Carper was shattered into fragments as if he had been made of crystal. Then there was nothing left of him but a pile of glittering dust on the stone floor. I helped the birth of a world of order, Trencom whispered. But from what have I seen in the female's mind? You turned it into a universe of madness and fear. It's not worth saving, but the universe you and your kind deserve. Trencom hurled Brutaka and his team, and Spirea used his magnetic powers to catch him before he could slam into the wall. The tentacles were withdrawn, wrapping themselves around the core of Trencom's being. Go, the entity said. Take yourselves from my prison. Take your memories, your plans with you. For the horrors you have already had in your mind, worse than I could ever visit upon, you condemned for your fate. Life in the universe and your kind have made. No one was going to take that time to argue. Gathering up Brutaka and Lariska, they fled the cave. Even as the stone walls surrounding the island receded into sand, only Artidax paused to look at the cavern where Carver had died, wondering for a moment just what it would take to end the life of a being older than the stars. To be continued. Chapter 7. Brutaka and Lariska stood together, watching Artidax standing silently by the rail of the ship. I worry about one, said Lariska. He has not spoken a word since we left Trencom's island and the death of his so-called friend Carper. Friends? Snorted Brutaka. Baraki don't have friends, just people they use. And Carper was Artidax's favorite puppet. Besides, don't waste your worry on him. Save it for us. He pointed off the bow. We've arrived. Looming out of the midst of the island of a black jagged rock, volcanic peaks and strange raw heat arcing and wheeling through the sky. Despite the bright light that played off the waters, the island seemed to be in perpetual shadow. Welcome to Artidax, said Brutaka. Bison approached, chuckling. Hope we survive our stay. Brutaka looked at his team. A Baraki, half-Skakti, a Makuta, former queen of the Miserix, a dark hunter, and himself. Well, we don't know who knows. The world might be better off without us. Brutaka and Spirea, being two of the most powerful team members, led the way to shore. As they trod through the ebony sands, all seemed quiet. So, nothing about defense. So, you know nothing about defenses here, asked Brutaka. Only what Krika had talked about, ideas he had, said Spirea. You realize this whole thing is a terrible idea. What? Freeing Miserix, said Spirea. He can't stop the plan. All we can find is an early death. Listen, what happened next was startling fast. The black sand began to swirl around Spirea, forming a hand which grabbed the Makuta. He started dragging him down. Brutaka grabbed Spirea's hand, calling for the others. Help me! Lariska, Vizon, and Brutaka rushed to his aid. Artidax hung back, occasionally glancing towards the ship of the contempting escape. The pull of the sand was too strong, and Spirea's mask had almost disappeared beneath it. Then Brutaka fired a Rotuka launcher, and the spinner striking the living sand and mutating the grains into a swarm of fireflies. Unable to maintain its grip, the new form freed Spirea, and the Makuta crawled back onto the beach, cursing. I'm an idiot, Brutaka said. I should have realized quicker rigged this place to sense the presence of a Makuta to react. He didn't want Miserix escaping or any other Brotherhood member finding him and finishing him off. Then I would be insane to go any further, said Spirea. I brought you here. You don't need me anymore. On the contrary, said Dariska, I think you would be very useful. Anyone ever hear of stalking Kiloka? Surprisingly, Vizon was the only one who nodded. When everyone turned to look at him, he shrugged. Vizon, he saw a lot of things when I came and saw him. I saw him too. Say, when we done here, who's up for killing him? I'll even clean up after. Dariska turned back to Brutaka, ignoring the lunactic companion. Kinkola are rodents, found in many places, among them Zakaz. When the Skakti need to cross land that might be booby traps, they send Kilola first. The creatures set off the traps and the Skakti can cross safely. And the traps here are sensitive to Makuta, said Brutaka, smiling. I see. And come to think of it, Spirea is somewhat rodent-like. Spirea backed on his feet, looking at Brutaka. No, not even if you threw me the chance to excavate that vortex. Watch your mouth, Brutaka spat, aiming her launcher at him. Well, you still have only one. Brutaka put his arm around Spirea and led the way. You're looking at a big picture here. When all this was over, the Brotherhood, you can still be a powerful creature. Without a head, it's going to need a new leader, and all beings I work for will remember who helped him and who didn't. Trust me, they have long memories. It only took a few more minutes of whispered conversation before Spirea had turned his back on the group and announced that he would be their guide to Artidax. He immediately set off inland, the rest following. Dariska fell in beside Brutaka, saying, you know full well that he'll never be leader of the Brotherhood. Let him think he might get to be the head, Brutaka replied. It'll distract him from the fact that he might well get loose in his own out here. Their path took them right up to the slope of a volcano. A tunnel had been bored through the mountain at some point, the only way to directly traverse the island. Spirea was standing up ahead when Vizon leapt in front of him, holding up his hands. Then he pointed downward at a razor-thin vine that stretched across the path that led to a pile of boulders specifically on the slope. Spirea stepped off carefully over the vine, followed by the others who went onto the tunnel, and it was only when they were already inside that Brutaka noticed that someone was missing. Where's Artidax? Dariska turned. There, look out! Brutaka could turn to see Artidax bringing his blade down on a vine. In the moment before, an avalanche of rocks cut them from the Baraki and trapped them in the tunnel. All they could see now was his evil smile. To be continued. Chapter 8. Brutaka pushed aside the pile of rubble and struggled to his feet. Around him, Spirea and Brutaka were using shadow energy to blast themselves free. Vizon and Dariska were nowhere to be seen. He glanced towards the now blocked tunnel entrance. A few blasts of power would no doubt clear the way from a pile of rocks and stone, but Artidax would be long gone by now. There would be a time to settle with him later. I've got him. Brutaka turned to see Dariska holding the squirming Vizon by the throat. I caught him sneaking down the side of the tunnel, the Dark Hunter said. Let's track down that traitor, snarled Brutaka. I want his shattered body beneath my heel. We're here to do a job, Brutaka replied. we keep moving, all of us, he added, looking hard at Vizon. The tunnel proved to be far more than a mere pathway. It opened up to a vast underground cavern spanned by a narrow bridge made of fibrous protodermis. Down below was a floor with a massive tangle of what looked like to be dead branches intertwined with each other. Their deep channels had been carved into the walls with lava flows over the centuries. These strange flying rahi had hung from the ceiling, their 6 eyes blinking slowly at the slight intruders into their realm. Remind me not to let Makuta Krika arrange my next pleasure trip, muttered Spirea. The whole island is volcanic, said Brutaka. Minor eruptions over the years, but nothing major. Tahu and Kilpaka were supposed to have taken care of this problem, otherwise we would probably have flash fried by now. No Carper, no Artidax, said Vizon. A sing-song voice. Who else would go next? Spirea, the sullen, and Brutaka, the boorish, Vizon, the vanquisher, or the Riska. The Dark Hunter had ripped out a dagger and flung it into the stone right at Vizon's feet. The mad half-Skakti turned to her, smiling, and said, "Or Lariska, the wise and powerful, glorious and Halmessel." Brutaka led the way across the bridge. At the far side, spilled through the narrow opening, a symbol of the Brotherhood of Makuta was sneered in the stone beside the portal. Someone, maybe Krika, maybe Miserix, had marked the path so long ago. "What are we going to do with this legendary Makuta after we find him?" asked Brutaka. "What makes you think he will even help the likes of you?" "Miserix hates the Brotherhood returning on him," Brutaka replied. "He would ally with a Matorn and an Ussel crab if he would get revenge on his fellow Makuta." "And so what would he be for you?" Brutaka pressed. "A general, a hero, a symbol around in which to ally resistance to the Brotherhood?" Brutaka shook his head. "Nothing quite so grand. He'll be a weapon like a Rotuka launcher or a Ghost Blaster, and we're going to aim him right at the Brutaka fortress in Destriel." Brutaka smiled. "And who, might I ask, are we?" Brutaka smiled back, a grin of a Kavinka about to feast. Now. Oh, what you don't know, he won't cut you in two and dump you off the bridge." "I hear something," said Lariska. "Up ahead, it might be a voice." "A rumble of the volcano." "I hear something too," said Vizon. "Shut up," replied Brutaka. "And I see something as well," Vizon continued. "But since you aren't interested, we're not," Brutaka snapped. "Personally, I always find my comments and observations more interesting," Vizon rambled on. "You haven't truly lived until you've seen the world through the eyes of madness. Why, half the time I don't know what I see when it's really there, or what I wish was there, or what I pray, I beg, I plead is not." "What did we bring him again?" said Spirea. "He'll break up the minority," said Lariska. "I like to break something much more satisfying," hissed Brutaka. "I hear a Skakti make the most appealing sound when you snap them into pieces." "But since you seem to have no interest," Vizon continued, utterly disabandoning his teammates' comments, "well then, I won't tell you that the floor is moving. We can find out on our own." "The floor is," Brutaka repeated. He looked down. Far below, the tangled growth of dead branches had indeed begun to shift. For a reason why it rapidly became clear. They weren't branches at all. They were twisted limbs of 1,000 crimson insects. Now, distangling themselves from each other. Apparently there was no time to wake up. They were ready for their morning meal. Swifter than anyone could have ever predicted, they began to swarm up the walls of the canyon on every side. In an instant they had blocked the openings of the ends of the bridge surrounding the rock now is gone, buried beneath the skittering sea of red and thousands of unthinking predatory eyes. No, 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 said Vizon, shaking his head. It's too late to apologize. Much too late. To be continued. Chapter 9. Brutaka scanned the carving with narrow eyes. The glowing eyes of the insects all around made him feel as if he were trapped in some lunatic starfield. Behind him he could hear Vizon humming softly, as if out for the afternoon stroll. Do we fight our way out here? Asked Oriska, hand on the hilt of her dagger. Brutaka's answer was to turn to Spirea. Okay, you control Rahi, make them clear a path. On one condition, said Spirea. Once I do, I go free. I turn right around and march out, take the boat, and if Artidax hasn't already, I leave. And I never see or hear any of you or anyone associated with you again. I wasn't talking to you, replied Brutaka. I was telling you. I am a Makuta, said Spirea, disgraced perhaps, a victim of jealousy and prejudice. And most definitely I was not dictated by some obnoxious insane. And Brutaka hit Spirea a solid blow on the mast, knocking the Makuta over the side of the narrow bridge. Spirea caught on a span just barely hung in space. I think what we call this a no position deal, said Brutaka. He triggered his mask power, opening a dimensional portal into space just below Spirea's feet. If I move that opening just a little bit further toward you, you'll find yourself in a dimension full of beings made of solid light. You know what they eat there? Shadow. You'll be food for them, Spirea. But I have to warn you, they're always hungry and they don't close their mouths when they chew. Spirea said nothing. Instead, he reduced his density and floated up away into Brutaka's portal. Well, then he drifted back to the bridge and turned solid once more. I'll do it, he said. Then I leave, and I advise you not to try and stop me. The Makuta concentrated, triggering his power to control the Rahi beast. Nothing happened, other than restless stirring among insects. In a few moments, Spirea gave up in frustration. They're already under control of a more powerful will. It must be Miserix. Brutaka gestured toward the wall of insect life that blocked the way they had come. I guess you're not leaving, he turned to Lariska, and we're fighting. You stay back with Vizon, Brutaka, Spirea, and I will lead the way. On Brutaka's signal, he had two powerful allies unleashed their powers on the insects, who blocked the passage up ahead. As quickly as the crimson figures fell, more came to replace them. Worse, the ones behind were now skittering across the bridge, closing in on Vizon and Lariska. I have an idea, said Brutaka, summoning the Rotuka discs to her launcher. She fired at the insects up ahead, the power of her discs mutating them into unrecognizable creatures. An instant later, the other insects fell, their unfortunate victims of her attack. The mutated insects were dead within seconds, killed for being different than the rest of the species. Seeing as her ploy had worked, Brutaka repeated the process, this time focusing on the insects blocking the edge of the bridge. As the mutations took hold of their former allies turned against them, and opening appeared in the wall of living creatures with a roar of triumph. She led the charge across the bridge and into the tunnel beyond. The team didn't stop running until they were well away from the cavern. And are they following us, Brutaka? They don't seem to be, Lariska answered. Maybe if they don't like to leave their nest, or maybe they just know we have to go back our way so they can eat us. And then Vizon offered cheerfully. Maybe there's another way out up ahead, said Brutaka, or maybe we can get to, or maybe we'll get to like it here, said Vizon. A few grass mats, some cave drawings, Some heads of my enemies mounted on the wall could be quite pleasant. Brutaka! Brutaka called him up ahead. I think you best see this. The team rushed through the tunnel to join Brutaka. She was still standing in the tunnel's end looking at another vast chamber. More specifically, she was looking at the largest occupant in the chamber. A massive dragon beast chained to the stone wall. All around it flew smaller Rahi, dodging the shadow that occasionally shot out from the creature's chest. What is that? Asked Ariska. Brutaka shook his head in amazement. Well, it's about 40 feet tall, red and silver, with 4 legs, a tail, and a nasty disposition. And it's who we were here to rescue. Miserix, whispered Spirea. All right, we can take him home, said Vizon, but don't expect me to clean up after him. To be concluded. Chapter 10. Vizon looked at the massive chained form of the dragon-like beast to his partners, then back at the dragon, then over to Brutaka. He opened his mouth to speak, but Brutaka cut him off. Don't say it, said Brutaka. We're going to need, Vizon began. A bigger boat, I know, Brutaka said. Anyone know what those things are flying around all around? Small winged creatures were indeed the fitting of all around the dragon. Now, then, one would bet at the scream of shattered rock. They're called clack, said Makuta Spirea. Something mutant created a long time back. Their sonic scream is formidable. They must be meant as guardians. Brutaka frowned. Guardians, all right, but against whom? And he knew the dragon was in fact Makuta Miserix, the ex-leader of the Brotherhood, and he had been ordered to executed, but Makuta Kricker insisted chain him up here on the island of Artidax. But the Brotherhood's job to rescue him, so the Order of Mine we can use him against his former organization. At the moment, Miserix suddenly took notice of them. His eyes narrowed as he spoke. His voice rumbled like a distant avalanche. Who are you? Brutaka started to say, friends. Then he decided he decided he didn't really want to be considered a friend of that thing. We're here to free you, he said instead. Can you shapeshift to a smaller form? Why would I wish to do that? Asked Miserix. Do you know how many of these creatures I had to absorb to reach the size where their screams no longer pain me? See, the size is the problem. Your immenseness, Vizon cut in. We only have a small boat, and it's hardly more than a raft, really. And if it sinks, well, we'll have to swim. Personally, I'm not big on swimming. Some friends of mine went here for a swim, I heard. Now they look like sea snakes. I just hurt just a head and a spine. And I have no spine. So I would just be a head. And Miserix's eyes glowed red, and a burst of laser vision struck Vizon, sending him tumbling backwards. Nat! Muttered the Makuta. He turned to check on Vizon. Brutaka saw that Spirea had backed off the shadows. Miserix had noticed too and bellowed. Tell me the one that came forth. Spirea took a reluctant step forward, and the sight of another Makuta and the dragon smiled. Spirea, I do remember you. When Artidax rose against me, you were one of the first to be by his side, and I have looked forward to meeting you again. Brutaka tightened his grip on his weapon. He did not like Miserix's tone at all. Oh, do you know I have not seen one of my species since Krika left me here? Miserix continued. We all meant to come, as Spirea said hurriedly. Artidax wouldn't let us. We all know you would benefit from your experience, your power, and your presence. But you did not come. But you did not come, rumbled Miserix. So now I shall benefit from yours. A hand made of living shadow erupted from the dragon's chest and grabbed Spirea and pulled him into Miserix's body. There wasn't even time for a scream. Vizon, back on his feet, stopped dead when he saw the Makuta consumed. I thought we were here to rescue you from our captivity, he whispered, not from the midday empty feeling. You know we can just as well easily leave you here to rot, Brutaka said to Miserix, or wait for the next volcanic eruption to rain lava down on your oversized head, or we could have your chance to take revenge on your brothers. What is it going to be? Miserix considered. He leaned forward as far as the chains would allow him and said, "Make your attempt. For what good would it do?" "I have seen those kinds of chains before," said Lariska. "They grow in strength with him, and they freed on his own power, and now they use it to hold him." Brutaka hefted his weapon. "Can they be broken?" "Not without causing him great pain." Brutaka gave him a grim smile. I'll cry tomorrow. Find a weak link," asked Brutaka. "We are going to need your help." Brutaka gave a grim smile. The vortex had been silent since they had entered the Miserix's presence. Brutaka had no doubt that she was planning something, but she dutifully stepped forward and stood beside him. Her eyes were never leaving the chained Makuta. "There," said Lariska, pointing to a segment in the chain that held Miserix's right arm. "Well, we concentrate fire on that." Brutaka and Brutaka took aim. He with his blade, she with her outstretched hand. An energy of shadow bolts struck the weak segment of the chain, bathing it in a continuous stream of power. After several minutes, the substance of the chain began to flake off, and after a few more, began to crack. The link then shattered into pieces. Miserix screamed loud enough to crack the mountain itself. The clock reacted instantly, flying toward the rescue demon, unleashing their sonic screams. Vizon and Lariska fought them off, while Brutaka used his blade to parry the streams of sound. Meanwhile, Miserix raised his arm tentatively, seeing it was indeed free of its bonds, and reaching over her with it, tore the other chain from the ground. This time, it did not scream, but only smiled. The clock were gaining ground now, driving the team back toward where the insects were lurking. And Miserix watched the battle for a moment, and then he opened his mouth and unleashed a power scream that felled the clock among with Vizon and Lariska. Brutaka and Brutaka barely remained conscious. Crawling over, Brutaka checked the two main members, but both were still living. "Now then," said Miserix, "where is Artidax?" Brutaka laughed. "And if I tell you, you will have no reason to keep us alive. Gratitude is not on the high list of Makuta emotions. I'll show you, but you are going to need a shrink down to make out the way we came." Your lack of imagination is disappointing," said Miserix, in as close as good spirits as a Makuta ever got. He reared his back and struck the side of the mountain with all of his might. Once again, the rock cracked and crumbled, and Miserix followed with his fragmentation powers, reducing the entire side of the volcano to shards of stone. Beyond it, Brutaka could only see the sky and the sea. "At last," said Miserix, "after so many millennia, I am free." Because before the Makuta's startling eyes, the dragon grew wings, and Miserix turned his crimson-scaled head at Brutaka and said, "Come, show me where my enemy hides, so I may grind his armor into dust and feel his energies." "No," shouted Brutaka. They want you to lead. They want to lead you into a trap. Listen to me. I too am an enemy of the Brotherhood, and Brutaka wants to wants to use you to sacrifice you as a pawn in the war against the Makuta. I want you for an ally. Miserix lowered his head and leaned against his massive face against Brutaka's. When he spoke, it was in a whisper. Little one, I am Makuta Miserix. I am no one's pawn. I am no one's ally. His next words came in a roar that drove Brutaka back into the wall. And I am no one's fool. Brutaka watched, looking unimpressed. Are you done? Miserix nodded slowly. Let us go. I have a universe to rediscover. Brutaka loaded a stunned Brutaka and now the semi-conscious Lariska and Vizon onto the dragon's back. He climbed on himself. Miserix unfolded his wings and stepped back into the open air. They soared high above the island and paused only long enough for Miserix to make a muttered vow to come back and destroy the place one day. Brutaka noted that the team's boat was gone. Artidax had gone away after all. Let him run. It doesn't matter, thought Brutaka. The storm is coming to this universe, and when it hits, there will be nowhere for anyone to hide. Miserix spread his wings, turned towards the north, carrying his passengers to the unknown. The end.